My cousins claimed my inheritance. I showed them the real will. The day my grandmother died, I thought the pain would come from losing her, but I was wrong, because the real pain began when my own family turned that loss into a battle over money, power, and secrets. My name is Daniel Mokina, and this is not just an inheritance story. This is a story about family betrayal, a hidden truth, and the moment everything I thought I knew was shattered. I remember walking into that quiet office, the air heavy with silence, the kind that makes your chest feel tight, the kind that tells you something is about to change forever. My cousins were already there, sitting like they owned the room, dressed sharp, calm, confident, like they were waiting for something they had already claimed. Jason leaned back in his chair with a smirk, Kyle kept checking his phone like nothing mattered, and Brandon sat quietly, watching everything like he already knew how this would end. That was my first warning, but I ignored it, because I still believed in family. I still believed that no matter what happened, we were connected by something deeper than money. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, powerful revenge stories, and shocking truth moments like this, make sure you subscribe right now and like this story, because what you are about to hear will change everything. The lawyer, Ms. Priya Naika, walked in with a file in her hands, her expression serious, professional, unreadable, and when she sat down, the room went completely still. This was it, the moment that would decide everything, the moment my grandmother's final wishes would be revealed. I sat there quietly, my hands resting on the table, my heart heavy but steady, because I knew my grandmother, I knew the bond we had, I knew the conversations we shared late at night, the way she always told me that I was different, that I understood her in a way no one else did, and because of that, I trusted her. I trusted that she had taken care of things, that she had made sure everything was fair. Then the reading began. At first, it sounded normal, formal words, legal phrases, the kind of language that feels distant and cold, but then something shifted. The assets were listed, the house, the savings, the business, everything she had worked her whole life to build, and then the names started coming. Jason Mokina. Kyle Mokina. Brandon Mokina. Each name landed like a heavy weight in my chest, but I stayed calm, because I was waiting for mine. I was waiting for the moment where everything would make sense. But that moment never came. My name was never mentioned, not once, not even a single line, not even a small piece, nothing. The silence that followed was louder than anything I had ever heard. It was like the world paused just long enough for the truth to sink in. This was not just a mistake, this felt like something else, something deeper, something wrong. Kyle laughed softly, breaking the silence like it meant nothing, like my entire existence had just been erased in front of me. Jason smiled, not even trying to hide it, and Brandon just looked at me, calm, cold, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. This was not just an inheritance story anymore, this was family betrayal in its purest form. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low but steady, asking the only question that made sense, "You sure that's correct?" Ms. Naika looked at the document again, then back at me, and said, "According to this will, yes." That answer hit harder than anything else, because it sounded final, it sounded official, it sounded like there was no room for doubt. But deep inside me, something refused to accept it, something kept whispering that this was not the full truth, that there was something hidden beneath the surface. My grandmother was not careless, she was not forgetful, she was precise, thoughtful, intentional, and there was no way she would leave me out completely, not after everything we shared. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in, and for the first time, I felt completely alone, surrounded by people who shared my blood but not my loyalty. Jason finally spoke, his tone casual, almost amused. "Looks like everything worked out the way it was supposed to." That sentence stayed with me, because it didn't sound surprised, it sounded planned. That was the moment the story changed for me, the moment this became more than just loss, more than just grief, it became a mystery, a legal drama story filled with questions that needed answers. I stood up slowly, not saying anything else, because I knew one thing for sure, this was not the end, not even close. As I walked out of that office, I felt something shift inside me, something stronger than anger, stronger than pain, it was determination. They thought this was over, they thought they had won, they thought the story had ended right there, but they didn't know about the hidden document, they didn't know about the possibility of a real will, they didn't know that the truth was still waiting to be uncovered. And as I stepped outside into the sunlight, taking a deep breath, I made a quiet promise to myself. This story was just beginning, and before it was over, the shocking truth would come out, and justice would be served. If you're ready for a story filled with twists, secrets, and a powerful comeback, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me, because what comes next will change everything. That night, I could not sleep, no matter how hard I tried, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same moment again and again, my name missing from the will, my cousin smiling, and that quiet voice inside me telling me something was not right. This was no longer just an inheritance story, it had become a deep and personal mystery, one filled with family betrayal, a hidden truth, and a question that refused to leave my mind. How could my grandmother, the one person who always stood by me, leave me with nothing? I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, replaying every memory I had with her, every conversation, every small detail that once felt ordinary but now felt important. She was not careless, she was not forgetful, and she definitely was not someone who would make such a big mistake. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like something had been changed, like the story I had been shown was not the full story. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, legal drama stories, and shocking truth moments like this, keep listening closely, because this is where everything begins to shift. I stood up and walked slowly to my desk, opening drawers I had not touched in months, searching for anything, any clue, any sign that could explain what was happening. Old letters, photos, small notes, memories of a life that suddenly felt far away, but nothing gave me answers. My frustration grew, but so did my determination, because deep inside, I knew this was not over. Then I remembered something small but strange, a book my grandmother had given me a few weeks before she passed. At the time, it felt like a simple gift, just another one of her thoughtful gestures, but now, it felt different, like it meant something more. I walked over to the shelf, my heart beating faster, and picked up the book. It looked normal, nothing special, but as I held it, I felt that same quiet instinct again, the one telling me to look deeper. Slowly, I opened it and began flipping through the pages, one by one, carefully, patiently, until something caught my attention. There, hidden between 2 pages, was a small envelope. My hands froze for a moment and I could feel the tension rising in my chest. This was it, the moment where the hidden truth begins to reveal itself. I took a deep breath and opened the envelope carefully, as if I was afraid it might disappear if I moved too fast. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly, with my grandmother's handwriting on it. The moment I saw it, everything around me felt quiet, like the world had paused just for this moment. I unfolded the paper slowly and began to read. Daniel, if you are reading this, it means something is wrong. Trust your instincts. Not everything is as it seems. Take this to Mr. Andre Jacobs. I read it again, just to be sure, and then again, because I needed to understand what it meant. This was not just a note, this was a message, a warning, a sign that she had seen this coming. My heart started racing, because now everything made sense, the missing name, the strange behavior of my cousins, the confidence they showed before the will was even read. This was not a mistake, this was a plan, and I had just found the first piece of proof. This inheritance story had just turned into something much bigger, a story of wealthy family secrets, hidden documents, and a truth that someone tried to bury. I stood there, holding that note, feeling a mix of emotions I could not fully explain, anger, relief, confusion, but most of all, clarity. I was not crazy, I was not forgotten, and I was definitely not out of the story. My grandmother had left me something more valuable than money, she had left me the truth, and now it was up to me to uncover it. I walked back to my bed and sat down, staring at the note, thinking about my next move. Mr. Andre Jacobs. That name meant something, I had heard it before, but I could not remember where. It didn't matter, because I knew one thing for sure, he was the key to everything. The question was not whether I would go see him, the question was what I would find when I did. I looked at the clock, it was late, but I didn't care, because sleep was no longer important. What mattered now was the truth, the real will, the one that had been hidden, the one that could change everything. This was no longer just about money, it was about justice, about proving that what was taken from me was never meant to be taken in the first place. As I lay back on my bed, still holding the note tightly in my hand, I made a decision. The next morning, I would find Mr. Jacobs, and I would get answers. No matter what it took, no matter how far this went, I would uncover the truth, because this story was far from over, and the shocking truth was closer than anyone realized. The next morning, I woke up with one clear thought in my mind: I was going to find the truth, no matter what it took, because this was no longer just an inheritance story. This had become a full legal drama story filled with family betrayal, hidden documents, and a shocking truth waiting to be revealed. I held my grandmother's note tightly in my hand as I got ready, reading it one more time, making sure I understood every word, every message she was trying to send me. Take this to Mr. Andre Jacobs. That name was now my only direction, my only lead, and I knew deep down that everything depended on what I would find when I met him. The air outside felt different that morning, heavier, like the world knew something I didn't yet know, and as I walked toward my car, I felt a mix of nerves and determination building inside me. This was the moment where everything could change, the moment where the hidden truth could finally come to light. The drive felt longer than usual, even though I followed the address carefully, my mind filled with questions, possibilities, and doubts that kept trying to slow me down, but I pushed through them, because I had come too far to turn back now. When I finally arrived at the building, I sat in the car for a few seconds, taking a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever was waiting inside. This was it, the next step in uncovering the real will. I stepped out and walked into the office, the quiet atmosphere reminding me of the lawyer's office from the day before, but this time, I felt different, stronger, more focused, like I was no longer just reacting, I was moving forward. A receptionist greeted me, and I told her I needed to see Mr. Andre Jacobs. She looked at me carefully, then asked if I had an appointment. I hesitated for a second, then placed the note on the desk. He told me to come, I said, even though I wasn't completely sure if that was true, but something about the note gave me confidence. She looked at the handwriting, then at me again, and without another word, she picked up the phone. A few minutes later, I was walking down a quiet hallway, my heart beating faster with every step, until I reached a door with his name on it. Mr. Andre Jacobs. This was the moment everything had been leading to. I knocked lightly, and a calm voice from inside said, "Come in." I opened the door and stepped inside, immediately noticing the calm, controlled presence of the man sitting behind the desk. He looked at me for a moment, then at the note in my hand, and something in his expression changed, like he understood more than I had said. "You must be Daniel," he said quietly. That alone was enough to send a wave of realization through me. He already knew who I was. This was not random, this was planned. I nodded and handed him the note. He took it carefully, reading it slowly, then placing it down on the desk with a deep breath. "Your grandmother was a very careful woman," he said. "She prepared for this." Those words confirmed everything I had been feeling. This was real. This was bigger than I thought. My voice came out steady but filled with urgency as I asked the question that had been building inside me since the moment I left that first office. "Is there another will?" The room went quiet for a second, and then he stood up slowly, walking toward a locked cabinet behind him. Every movement felt deliberate, controlled, like he knew the weight of what he was about to reveal. He unlocked the cabinet and pulled out a file, thick, sealed, and marked with official stamps. My heart started racing again, because I knew, I could feel it, this was it, the hidden document, the one that could change everything. He placed the file on the desk and looked directly at me. "What you saw yesterday was not the real will," he said. Those words hit me like a shock, even though I had suspected it all along. Hearing it confirmed made everything real. He opened the file and carefully took out the document inside. "This is the real will your grandmother prepared." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locked on the paper, my mind trying to stay calm while everything inside me was exploding with questions and emotions. He handed it to me, and as I began to read, everything changed. My name was there, clearly written, not once, but throughout the entire document. The house, the business, the assets, everything had been left to me. This was the truth. This was what was meant to happen. This was the inheritance story that was supposed to be told, not the one my cousins had tried to create. I looked up at him, my voice low but sharp. Then what was that other will? He sighed slightly, leaning back in his chair. It appears someone replaced the original with a false document. The room felt heavier again, but this time, it was different. This was not confusion anymore, this was clarity mixed with anger. This was proof of family betrayal at the highest level. They didn't just take what wasn't theirs, they planned it, they manipulated it, they thought they could rewrite the truth and get away with it. But they were wrong. I placed the real will back on the desk carefully, my mind already moving to the next step. This was not just about proving them wrong, this was about exposing everything, about bringing the hidden truth into the light and making sure justice was served. Mr. Jacobs looked at me and said, "What you do next is very important." I nodded slowly, because I already knew. This story was not over. In fact, it had just reached the point where everything was about to turn. The shocking truth was no longer hidden, and now, it was time for the world to see it. The moment I walked out of Mr. Andre Jacobs's office, I knew everything had changed, because I was no longer the person who had been left out of an inheritance story. I was now the person holding the hidden truth, the real will, and the power to expose a carefully planned family betrayal. The air felt sharper, clearer, like the world had shifted in my favor, but I knew this was only the beginning, because revealing the truth would not be easy, and facing my cousins again would be the real test. This was no longer just about money, this was a full legal drama story, a fight for justice, a moment where everything hidden would come into the light. I stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm, to stay focused, because emotions could destroy everything if I let them take control. My cousins thought they had already won, they believed their version of the story was final, and that confidence would be their weakness. I pulled out my phone and made the call that would set everything in motion, requesting another official meeting with Ms. Priya Naika, making sure it was clear that new information had come forward regarding the will. My voice was steady, controlled, but inside, I could feel the tension building, because I knew this meeting would not just be a conversation, it would be a confrontation. Hours later, I found myself standing outside the same office where everything had gone wrong, but this time, I felt different, stronger, more prepared, like I was stepping into a moment I was meant to face. When I walked in, they were already there, just like before, sitting in the same positions, wearing the same expressions of confidence and control, like nothing could touch them. Jason looked at me and smiled, that same calm, arrogant smile, as if he was watching a story he had already finished. Kyle leaned back, shaking his head slightly, like I was wasting everyone's time, and Brandon just watched quietly, his eyes sharp, trying to read me, trying to understand why I had come back. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, revenge stories, and shocking truth moments like this, make sure you stay with this story, because this is where everything begins to turn. I took my seat slowly, placing the file in front of me, not saying a word, because I knew timing was everything. Ms. Naika entered the room and sat down, her expression serious as always, but this time, there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "You requested this meeting," she said, looking directly at me. I nodded once. "Yes, because the document that was read yesterday is not the real will." The room went completely silent, but it was not the same silence as before. This one was heavier, filled with tension, with uncertainty, with the first cracks in their confidence starting to show. Jason laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're still holding on to that," he said, his tone dismissive, but I could see it, just for a second, a small flicker of doubt in his eyes. That was all I needed. I opened the file slowly and placed the real will on the table, sliding it toward Ms. Naika. "This is the original document," I said calmly. She looked at it carefully, her expression changing as she began to read, her professional composure still there, but now mixed with something else, something serious. She adjusted her glasses slightly and began reading aloud, and with every word, the room shifted. My name echoed through the space, clear, undeniable, repeated again and again, connected to everything that had been taken from me. The house, the business, the assets, all of it, legally and rightfully mine. The confidence in the room disappeared slowly, like a light fading out. Kyle sat up straight, no longer relaxed. Brandon leaned forward, his calm expression breaking for the first time, and Jason stopped smiling. "This doesn't make sense," he said, his voice tighter now, controlled, but no longer confident. But it made perfect sense, because this was the truth, the hidden document that had been protected, the real will that could not be erased. Ms. Nika finished reading and placed the document down carefully, her expression now fully serious. "This appears to be a valid and properly executed will," she said, her voice firm. That sentence changed everything. It was official. It was confirmed. It was over for them. But they were not ready to accept it. "This is fake," Kyle said quickly, his voice rising, his control slipping. "He's trying to manipulate everything." I looked at him calmly, not reacting, because I knew the truth did not need to shout, it only needed to stand. "If it's fake," I said quietly, "then you won't mind having it verified." That was the moment the room shifted completely, because they had no answer, no argument, no way out. This was not just a simple inheritance story anymore, this was the exposure of wealthy family secrets, the unraveling of a plan that was never supposed to fail. Mr. Jacobs stepped forward slightly, confirming the document, explaining its legal standing, and with every word, their position weakened, their control slipping further away. Jason leaned forward, his expression now serious, calculating, but the confidence was gone. "What are you trying to do?" he asked. I met his eyes directly, calm, steady, unshaken. "I'm not trying to do anything," I said. "I'm just telling the truth." That was the difference between us. They had built their story on lies, and I was standing on the truth. And in that moment, everyone in that room could see it clearly. The shocking truth had been revealed, the hidden document had come into the light, and the story they thought they controlled had completely turned against them. As I sat back in my chair, I realized something important. This was not just about winning, this was about restoring what was right, about proving that no matter how carefully a lie is planned, the truth will always find a way to rise. And now, there was only one thing left, the final outcome, the moment where justice would be fully served. The final day arrived quietly, but the weight of everything that had happened made it feel heavier than any moment before, because this was no longer just an inheritance story, this was the ending of a long legal drama story filled with family betrayal, hidden documents, and a shocking truth that had finally come into the light. My name is Daniel Mokina, and as I stood outside the courthouse, I knew this was the moment where everything would be decided, not just on paper, but in truth, in justice, and in the reality that no lie can last forever. The air was calm, but inside me, there was a steady focus, not anger, not fear, just clarity, because I had seen everything unfold step by step, from the moment my name was erased, to the moment I discovered the hidden truth, to the moment I revealed the real will in front of everyone. This was the final step. When I walked inside, I saw them again, my cousins, the same faces that once carried confidence, now replaced with tension, frustration, and something they could no longer hide, uncertainty. Jason tried to keep his composure, but his eyes showed the pressure he was under. Kyle looked restless, unable to sit still, and Brandon, for the first time, avoided eye contact completely. The roles had changed, the story had shifted, and everyone in that room could feel it. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, revenge stories, and powerful justice moments, make sure you subscribe, like this story, and comment which country you are watching from, because this final chapter is where everything comes together. The proceedings began, and everything moved with a calm but serious pace, each word spoken carrying weight, each document reviewed with careful attention, because this was not just about money, this was about truth, about proving what was real and what had been manipulated. The real will was presented again, clear, detailed, undeniable, and supported by everything needed to confirm its validity. The hidden document that my grandmother had protected became the center of everything, the one piece of truth that could not be ignored. The opposing arguments were weak, uncertain, built on a version of events that no longer held together, and with every question asked, with every answer given, their story began to fall apart completely. This was the moment where the truth stood strong and the lies began to collapse. I sat there quietly, listening, watching, not needing to speak much, because the truth was speaking for itself, and that was the most powerful position to be in. This was not about shouting or proving a point with emotion, this was about letting the facts reveal everything, letting the reality of the situation unfold naturally. Time passed, but it felt like everything was happening all at once, every second carrying the weight of the entire journey, until finally, the decision was made. The real will was confirmed as the valid and legal document, the false version was dismissed completely, and just like that, everything changed. The house, the business, the assets, everything that had been taken from me was restored, not as a gift, not as luck, but as justice. The room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now, one filled with finality, with understanding, with the clear knowledge that the truth had won. My cousin sat there, unable to respond, unable to deny it, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to hide behind. The family betrayal that had started this story had been exposed completely, and now, they were left to face the consequences of their actions. I stood up slowly, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with a quiet sense of closure, because this was never about revenge, this was about restoring what was right, about honoring my grandmother's true wishes, about making sure her voice was heard clearly through the real will she had carefully prepared. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt something I had not felt since the beginning of this story, peace. The weight that had followed me, the confusion, the frustration, it all lifted, replaced by a calm understanding that the truth will always find a way to rise, no matter how deeply it is buried. This inheritance story, filled with wealthy family secrets, hidden truth, and a powerful comeback, had reached its end, but the lesson it carried would stay with me forever. Not everyone who stands close to you stands with you, and not every story ends the way it begins, but if you hold on, if you search for the truth, if you refuse to accept what feels wrong, you will find your way back to what is right. As I stood outside, looking up at the sky, I thought about my grandmother, about the way she had planned everything, the way she had protected me even after she was gone, and I understood that this was her final gift, not just the inheritance, but the strength to fight for the truth. If this story moved you, if you believe in justice, truth, and powerful life stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like this story, and comment which country you are watching from, because your support brings more stories like this to life, and sometimes, the stories we share are the ones that remind us who we really are.